Well, hello, nice people. How you doing? And in this video, we are going to analyze someone's question. Someone actually asked me, what do you think of the DNA Brian Foerster studies done on the Paraccas elongated skulls? And this vid was referred to, and it's a brilliant video. Brian Foerster's talking about the differences between the genuine and the non-genuine ones. In this case, he's holding up a genuine ones. And one of the things, the great things that he did was he actually proved that some of them were real and some of them were contrived, elongated, because why would you contrive them if someone didn't look like that in the first place? And that was Eric von Daniken's argument a long time ago. And Foerster's proved that with DNA. And so what about the migration? So Foerster has confirmed what we've said in an earlier video. We showed that Phrygian doorway in the cliff, which looks very much like the one of the Inca doorways. And so where are we going with this? In this video, we're saying, look, the Trojan War was the major event of 3,000 years ago. Did the Trojan War have something to do with forcing the Redheads to the New World? And did people migrate to the New World in this time? And we're going to prove that they did. They had brilliant ships. They could go worldwide. And this is recorded in the Illiad, believe it or not. And we're going to prove that in this video. It's just amazing. So for starters, I've noticed online, looking up the physical characteristics, goddess born swift Achilles remembered another thing he must do. Standing apart from the pyre, he cut off a tawny lock of his hair. This is red hair. This was from a Reddit thread saying, hey, hang on, they've got red hair. So now tawny-haired Menelaus, there we go. So it seems the Redheads had already entered Greece from the north. And it seems in ancient times, this was an East European characteristic, just to have red hair. And they had entered Greece from the north. They had brought their traditions into Mycenaean Greece. And maybe they were the Mycenaeans. Just interesting. So, Scheria, this is something from mentioned in the Iliad. And when you read about this, your eyes are going to pop out of your head. You won't believe what you're reading. It's a region in Greek mythology. And basically, Odysseus is coming home. Odysseus is he's coming home, and we all know it takes him 10 years, which is kind of unusual because to get from Turkey to Greece would take about a day. So why would it take 10 long years? Has he gone to America? And that's a question. That's an interesting question. Returning home to Ithaca, did he return home to Ithaca? I doubt it. I doubt the Greek names that have been imposed in the Iliad are in fact the original names, because this was done by a fellow called Omar, a Phoenician. Let's have a look what's going on. So basically, you're not going to believe this. This is the last destination before Ithaca, apparently, but it's also the furthest place you can get. So that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's the furthest place you can get, and basically he gets directed to he's naked, he's washed up on the beach after many long troubles, those who have seen the Italian Ulysses film, and he goes to the palace of King Alcinous. And King Alcinous, basically this is an incredible palace, so let's describe it. The front doors are flanked with two dogs made of silver and gold, constructed by Hephaestus. The walls are of bronze that shines like the sun, with gates made of gold. Could be talking about orichalcum. Within the walls there is a magnificent garden with apple, pear, pomegranate trees that grow year-round. The palace is equipped with a lighting system consisting of golden statues of young men bearing torches. So they've got some kind of electricity. Possibly, after Odysseus tells Alcinous and his court the story of his adventures after the Trojan War, the Phoenicians take him to Ithaca on one of their ships. And how did he get from the furthest possible place you can get back to Ithaca? Because it looks like he went almost all the way to the Atlantic, to America. And it's not just me saying that. Ancient authors are saying this too. The Phaekean ships, wait till you read this. The Phaekeans possessed remarkable ships. They were quite different from the Pentaconters, the ships used in the Trojan War. They were steered by thought. King Alcinous says the Phaekeans carried Rhadamanthus to Euboea, which is the furthest of any place, and came back on the same day. He also explains to Odysseus what sort of information the Phaekean ships require in order to take him home to Ithaca. Now read this. Tell me also your country, nation, city, that our ships may shape their purpose accordingly and take you there. For it's almost like GPS. So the Phaekeans have no pilots, their vessels have no rudders, as those of the other nations have, but the ships themselves understand what it is we are thinking about and want. They know all the cities and countries of the whole world and can traverse the city just as well, even when it is covered with mist and cloud, so that there is no danger of being wrecked or coming to any harm. Now, to me, this seems like two things are going on. The first is that we're describing super ancient GPS computer technology. The second is that this earlier legend is being associated with a later people active during the Trojan War, a Copper Age people who nevertheless have excellent sailing characteristics. So here we go. Homer describes the Phaekean ships as fast as a falcon and gives a vivid description of the ship's departure. The ship bounded forward on her way as a four-in-hand chariot flies over the course when the horses feel the whip. Her prow curveted as it were the neck of a stallion, and a great wave of dark blue water seethed in her wake. She held steady on her course, and even a falcon, swiftest of all the birds, could not have kept pace with her. So it's describing some ancient technology. It's associating it with possibly the Redheads of 3000 BC who could travel around the world, who could go anywhere. And it's saying that this was a place called Scheria, and it was the furthest of any place. And Odysseus found himself washed up there after so much trouble and misery for 10 years. And they took him back to Ithaca. Amazing. So he got back to the old world. So Redheads, the Redheads that Brian Foerster showed. Something about Redheads is very interesting. Where do they come from? It's quite interesting. So they are from Eastern Europe, and they are found in Ireland, UK. And they're extremely intelligent people. They've been in Europe for obviously, an extremely long period of time because their skin doesn't tan, doesn't need to. They've lost that ability. And when you get to this place, basically the National Portrait Gallery, I think it's next to Trafalgar Square in London. And when I went in there, I was shocked. Every single portrait of everyone who was great in Britain's history. And I thought to myself, hang on a sec, they've all got the same funny looking eyes, and it's like they're all related. Every single one of them, every single person significant in British history is a redhead. Everyone. So Scythia are Scythians, and Scythia corresponds to kind of the same area that Brian Foerster in his DNA checks found that the ancient elongated skull redheads came from, which is, he said it was the Caucasus range between the Black Sea and the Caspian, and these were known as Scythian people. Later on, they're also called the Aryans, and they went to Ireland as well, so that's probably why the Irish are redheaded. Those people just went over there. They went to Parthia, they are the Parthians as well. They were initially redheaded. Also, they went to Iraq. The people, the Marsh Arabs are redheaded, literally to this day, they're redheaded. There we go. So red hair, it's very interesting. Now, what do we know about red hair, and was it mistreated in antiquity the way it's kind of mistreated a little bit today? So in the Malleus Maleficarum, which we know is the witch hunting book, it notes that red hair and green eyes were thought to be the sign of a witch, werewolf, or vampire during the Middle Ages. Those whose hair is red of a certain particular shade are unmistakably vampires. It is significant that in ancient Egypt, as Manaturia tells us, human sacrifices were offered at the grave of Osiris, and the victims were red-headed men who were burned, their ashes being scattered far and wide by winnowing fans. It's as if there are these fans going on. It is held by some authorities this was done to fertilize the field and produce a bounteous harvest. Red hair symbolizing the golden wealth of the corn. But these men were called Typhonians, and were representatives not of Osiris, but of his evil rival Typhon, whose hair was red. So these people are seen as kind of, a bit different. So, and looking at the redheads, portrait of a lady, they're everywhere, they're all around the world, England, Italy, they're everywhere. Everywhere you find them. Redbeard, an Ottoman admiral. Look, during the Spanish Inquisition, people of Redhead were identified as Jewish. Now, the Jews also are from Eastern Europe, obviously, and isolated for persecution. In medieval Italy and Spain, red hair was associated with heretical nature of Jews, the rejection of Jesus. Judas Iscariot was commonly depicted as red-haired in Italian and Spanish art. So this must go back to ancient times. Writers from Shakespeare to Dickens will identify Jewish characters by giving them red hair, such as the villainous characters Shylock and Fagin. And it goes on and on and on. The medieval prejudice against red hair may have derived from ancient biblical tradition in relation to biblical figures such as Esau and King David. The ancient historian Josephus would mistranslate the Hebrew Torah to describe a more positive figure of King David as golden-haired, in contrast to the negative figure of Esau, even though original Hebrew Torah implies that both King David and Esau had fiery red hair. So the Redheads have come down and they have conquered the ancient Middle East, and they are responsible possibly for founding many ancient civilizations there. This is unbelievable. So now let's get to the other people. So we see the Redhead people seem to have traveled around the world. They could go anywhere in 3000 BC. Brian Foerster highlights that date. I think it makes a lot of sense. There might have been earlier migrations as well, but 3000 BC is looking good. It looks like they must have been the Phaekeans, that was their name, in the Illiad. Now there were other people who fled because of the Trojan War. Genius people who must have had big heads because they would conquer the world. Who am I talking about? You know who I'm talking about. The Romans. These people seem to have initially been a red-headed people who fled from burning Troy. And what happened was, in their ancient history, in Virgil's Aeneid, the reason they are living on this side of Italy is they're running away from the Greeks who have colonized this side of Italy. You see, look, the Greeks are a coastal people. Why are they a coastal people? They've just arrived. Here are the Italians, the natives. And here are all these other peoples who have arrived. But the Romans have conquered a coastal area on this side of Italy to get away from the Greeks. And so have the I think this means ex-Trojans, Etruscans, next to them, also fleeing from Anatolia. And these are basically probably Anatolian peoples. Latins are probably Lydians. I saw that on a blog. It makes a lot of sense. So Aeneas was the one who came and he founded Rome. There are two Roman foundation stories, one with Romulus and Remus, one with Aeneas. The reason is Rome is initially multicultural at the foundation because the Trojans conquer the earlier Latin peoples who are there as well. It's like probably the Trojans are Etruscans living on top of the Latin people who are also from Asia Minor, the Lydians. And the Roman, when you study classics, it's so interesting. You can see how the ancient Greeks used to think, how the ancient Romans used to think, how they describe their historical characters. So Aeneas, as he's escaping burning Troy, he just picks up his father and his son and they go. And I believe they leave all the women behind because they think the women come second. Manly virtue first. We need to found a new country. And we'll find new women. That's okay. But we need to get on the ships and we need to get the hell out of here because it looks like Asia Minor is being flooded with people, flooded with invaders. Unbelievable. So this is the pathway of Aeneas as he left the area. And look, this whole region was probably dominated by Troy. So it's a big country, not just a city. Just forget about the fact it's a city. It's a country as well. And they fled, they went here, they went there, and eventually they end up in Rome. And we know of this. And there are lots of stories about the Trojan War. There's not just the Illiad and the Odyssey. In ancient times, this was discovered in an ancient chronicle, the Dictys Cretensis and the Dara's manuscript as well. And Nero was so happy that he found a new version of the Trojan War, he gave these people a prize. So, of course, it's considered as a forgery. I'll just explain it briefly because it's very interesting. There are lots of stories about this surviving until classical antiquity. It says an elaborate frame story presented in the prologue details how the manuscript of this work, written in Phoenician characters, so it's written in an old alphabet basically. It could be runes, could be Nordic runes, on tablets of limewood or tree bark survived. Hey, I don't think this is fake. This is true because the Novgorodians, the ancient Vikings, wrote on bark. Survived. It is said to have been enclosed in a leaden box, buried by its author. There it remained. When in the 13th year of Nero reign, the sepulchre was burst open by a terrible earthquake. The coffer was exposed to view and observed by some shepherds who, having ascertained that it did not, as they had first hoped, contain a treasure, conveyed it to their master, Paraccas, who in his turn presented it to Rutilius Rufus. Rufus, by the way, redheaded name. The Roman governor of the synchronicity, the Roman governor of the province by whom Paraccas and the casket were dispatched to the Emperor Nero. upon learning that the letters were Phoenician, summoned to his presence men skilled in that language, by whom the contents were explained. The whole, having been translated into Greek, was deposited into one of the public libraries, and Eupraxis was dismissed, loaded with rewards. So basically, this is an alternate story of the Trojan War, and it actually mentions earlier Trojan Wars. That's right, earlier Trojan Wars. And it actually says in this story that the reason Helen of Troy was kidnapped by the Greeks was actually revenge for the Greeks kidnapping a woman, the Trojans kidnapping a woman from the Greeks. Unbelievable, just unbelievable. So I wanted to mention that fascinating fact. And now look, the people we know went even further afield than Rome, further afield than Etruria. Geoffrey of Monmouth, the history of the kings of Britain. And I can't say enough good about how amazing this document is. And I urge you all, if you're interested in this, to give it a massive read. It is genius. It is a great document. It is a Bronze Age document which purports to start British history in about 1000 BC after the fall of Troy, when the Trojans finally arrive in Britain because they've got nowhere else to go. And they tell the story about this. There's nowhere else to go. And one wonders, if there's nowhere else to go for the Trojans in powerful numbers, what about these persecuted, funny-looking, red-headed skull people? Is this why they went to America? They really had to get away from everyone who was pointing at them and literally laughing. You see what I'm saying? So what's happened is, I'm going to paraphrase. What happens is King Brutus is born in Greek captivity. He's a Trojan noble, but he's also a slave, and he's the leader of all the slaves who are the Trojans living inside Greece. And basically, eventually they say, stuff it, we're not living as slaves anymore. They say to the Greek king, let us live in a forest. We'll live in the forest, and we'll leave you alone. And the Greek king laughs at them. His name is Pandrasus. And there's no record of Pandrasus in Greek history, I would think to myself, well, if this story was fake, if this was a fake story, wouldn't they just copy a popular name of a Greek king? But they don't. They have something unique, which is fascinating. And so they start a war, and they kidnap Pandrasus. And then they say to him, well, what are we going to do? They say to each other, what are we going to do now that we've kidnapped Pandrasus? Do we demand our own kingdom, in which case they'll keep attacking us, or do we just leave? Do we go somewhere else? And they say, who else could have been So Pandrasus is now giving a speech to the Trojans when he's saying, okay, you've captured me. I admit it. And he says, who else? And he says, who else could have encouraged them to make head against the Greeks? With so small a body of men, vanquished so numerous and powerful an army. So it seems the Mycenaean army is much huger than the Trojan army, and taken their king prisoner in such an engagement. And therefore, since this noble youth has gained so much glory by the opposition which he has made to me, I give him my daughter Inonia, and also gold, silver, ships, corn, wine, and oil, and whatever you find necessary for your voyage. If you shall alter your resolution, and think it fit to continue among the Greeks, I will grant you a third part of my kingdom for your habitation. If not, I will faithfully perform my promise, and for your greater security will stay as a hostage among you till I have made it good. And then what happened? 324 ships, all kinds of provision. Daughter is married to him, gold and silver, and they set off. They set sail with a fair wind. Inona, standing on the stern of the ship, swooned away several times in Brutus's arms, with many sighs and tears, lamented their leaving her parents and country, not ever turned her eyes from the shore while it was in sight. And it goes on and on and on. And they're basically traveling around the Mediterranean, and you're not yet sure where the hell they need to go, where to set up a new kingdom. It looks like Aeneas has already left. He left immediately. He thought, I've had enough. He went to Rome. But these people have stayed a generation or two longer. These Brutians, these other Trojans. And basically what happens is they wash themselves up on an island called Laodicea. And Brutus, not knowing this, not knowing that it was a wasteland, sent 300 armed men ashore to see who inhabited it. But they, finding nobody, killed several kinds of wild beasts, which they met with groves and woods, and came to a desolate city in which they found a temple of Diana. So desolate city. There's been a destruction, maybe a tsunami. Something has destroyed it. And it is a statue of that goddess which gave answers to these that came to consult her. So he's got an idea. He's going to ask the goddess, where do I go? Where the hell do I go? And so this is what happens. Brutus himself, so he attends the altar. He arrives at the place. He made 3 fires to 3 deities, Jupiter, Mercury, Diana, sacrifices to each of them. And then he asks the goddess of woods, tremendous of the chase, he's talking to the Earth Mother, to mountain boars and all the savage race, wild over the ethereal walks expands the sway, and over the infernal mansions void of day. Look upon us on earth, unfold our fate, and say what region is our destined seat. And what shall we next thy lasting temples raise, and choirs of virgins celebrate thy praise? So this is a very ancient Eastern cult, choirs of virgins. This is something from the East. It's a sacred temple. Although they're virgins, there's also a cult of sacred prostitution associated with this in the East. And then he falls asleep. And then the 3rd hour of the night, it's at 3 a.m., the usual time for deep sleep, the goddess presents before him and tells him, and Brute, sabucasium solis trans Gallica regna. Brutus, there lies beyond the Gallic bounds an island which the western sea surrounds, by giants once possessed, now few remain, to bar thy entrance or obstruct thy reign. To reach that happy shore thy sails employ. There fate decrees to raise a second Troy, and found an empire in thy royal line, which time shall never destroy, nor bounds confine. So he's awakened in the vision, and then he thinks, okay, I'll do it. And he goes to Britain, and he's in Africa, he's in Carthage. He enters Aquitaine with his friend Corinneus. And by the way, Brutus and Corinneus they're in the Illiad as Aeneas and Paraccas, I believe. And they're in Mauritania. And eventually they find the king of Aquitaine is called Gopharius, which to me sounds like Carfrey. He's a giant. They get rid of them. And then he founds the city of Tours. And he goes to Britain eventually. And he fights the giants in Britain. And you can read this yourself. It's a genius book. I love it. And the island was called Albion, inhabited by none but a few giants. Why? Why none but a few? It seems some catastrophe has occurred. I would say, some great catastrophe has occurred, great migration. I would even say that King Arthur was in charge at the time. And and there was a great migration. All the knights went on a grail quest. That was probably a migration possibly to Egypt. And that's why they started speaking English in Egypt, as I believe. That's why they stopped making dolmens in Europe, and they start making mastabas in Egypt. And it goes on and on. They throw the giants into the sea and building a new Troy upon the River Thames. There you go. So it's brilliant. And if you think it's fake, write down at the conclusion. But as for the kings that have succeeded among them in Wales since that time, so he stops in Julius Caesar's, he stops in about 500 AD, and I can tell that this is a genuine text because you can tell that there are different authors. It's not one author. You can see where one author takes over and another author stops because the style changes, the type of information changes, the way of presenting the information changes. So he's saying here, I leave them to the history of Caradoc and Lancarvan, my contemporary, as I do the kings of the Saxons to William of Malmesbury and Henry of Huntingdon, but I advise them to be silent concerning the kings of the Britons. So he's saying, don't call me a forger, since they have not the book written in the British tongue, which Walter, Archdeacon of Oxford, brought out of Brittany, and which, being a true history, published in honour of those princes, I have taken thus care to translate. Brilliant. Brilliant. So there we go. And that is the end of the video. I hope you have enjoyed. People went from everywhere in 3000 BC, possibly to America, to Britain, to Etruria, to Rome, everywhere. These ancient redheads starting new empires.